this is a spoiler.
You can't
You
listen to
know,
this and not have spoilers.
okay, so would anybody like to venture a summary of?
Yeah, I think it should be Mary.
Great. Second.
Let's see. Existential crisis in beautiful language.
With Southern charm.
Absolutely.
Well, take us through the plot, because I've started this book several times throughout the month, and it's a little decohered for me. So I think it'd be helpful too for all of us to make sure we have the book kind of in totality, what we understand about it, and it'd be helpful for me at least.
Okay. Well, we start out, he's back from the war for a while, and he is living an everyday life. And everydayness is his goal, because apparently when he lives in a way where he's more aware, it's too upsetting. And he moves he moves out to a place genteel, gentlemanly, away from New Orleans, so that he can live quietly. But then, as he's living quietly, the search comes upon him. So introspection, looking for meaning in life, rears its ugly head, and he goes through various, we go through his life with him, especially with his aunt and his aunt's stepdaughter. And the stepdaughter is herself having an existential crisis that mirrors him in some ways. And she seems to live closer to the bone with her crisis. And let's see, what else happens? They go away. He, I think, assumes that she has told her stepmother, his aunt, that she's going away. They go to Chicago. They have sex on the train, and it's very uncomfortable. And they get to Chicago, and his aunt eventually finds them, comes back, shames him in really horrifying way. And in the end, he comes around to basically succumbing to what people expect of him and giving up the search and marrying his aunt's stepdaughter, and maybe taking a different tack into everydayness, but basically living a life of service for his wife and his aunt. But along the way, there's just so much more. His half brother is a really big character. This innocent, wide-eyed boy who's got a terrible physical disability and eventually dies. And
Lonnie.
Yeah, when he dies, innocence dies. And that, I think that when he dies, the search is really over. It's just too depressing. But yeah, I don't know. Anybody else?
No, that was good. It's hard to do that with this novel, I think, because it's not really a plot-based novel in a lot of ways.
Which is good.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think current literature, if you want to call it that, is too focused on plot-based novels.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as totally devoid of plot as like a lot of avant-garde literature or like a Beckett novel or something like that, but it definitely is kind of like Mary was saying, like the flora and fauna along the way are really more the point than getting to the destination, whatever that is. Because that's kind of a question, I think, like where you're left at the end of this novel and where you think these people are going.
Well, yeah, and because you have Binks, or Jack Bowling narrating this, it's from his perspective mostly. I think that there might be times where it jumps out or gets a little bit more. Anyhow, you mostly see it through his eyes, and the story that he's telling is one of history, and so you're living in this place that he knows, and he's often seeing somebody, and then that triggering a memory and telling you about the time that such and such happened and all of the circumstances. Meanwhile, the conversation is going on. I remember there was this really funny scene where he's talking with somebody, and you don't hear the conversation, you're just in his head. You realize, and this is one of his refrains, that people aren't really listening. They're mostly just dead, and they're still communicating with you. And then he would hear an answer or hear a question. They're like, Jack, you listening? And he was like, oh, yeah, you should trade the shares up, and give something very specific. And then he would go back into his meditation because that was all he had to do to keep this game alive. It was very simple for him. And he was constantly seeing the manner in which people were engaged in life and looking, and very observant. And he could tell most of the time that people would ask, for example, what the problem with the world is. And he thought that it was an interesting question, and he'd give an answer, but he found most people wouldn't listen. So, I mean, he's at odds in his life, and looking, just as Kate is, for, I mean, that's the search. To be onto something, and to not is to be sunk in the everydayness. And there was a bit where he was talking about whenever he was at his height of intelligence, or whenever he was just rounding the bend on a lot of large philosophical thoughts, he talks about reading, and this would be funny, this is funny to me, but just for the philosophy group, I mean, he was reading Schrodinger's What is Life, the book by Einstein, and just really on the edge of contemporary scientific understanding. Feels as if he figured it out, and then lies awake, and there's something left over. Even though he's gone as far as he can in his thinking, there's still this life, this everydayness, and it pulls him back in. And so the way that he tries to engage with that is, I think, the crux of the novel, and it doesn't get resolved. And at the very end, he's just left with reticence. What do I say? I've got to end this book. So this is what's happening. This is as far as I've got.
Yes. So much for the search.
Yeah, and at the same time, he's constantly, he forgets about it. And the first time he remembers it is whenever he's getting ready for work, and he looks at his objects on the table, the watch and the wallet, and he sees them for the first time as the strange objects that they are, and not a part of his life. And then he remembers that he was onto something one time, and that other people are onto something, but not anymore. Most of them are dead. And the movies are onto something, but they screw it up and make it happy.
Yeah. Or because everything does end in despair. I think that a line that's really, that's a good indication of what you just said. It is a pleasure to carry out the duties of a citizen and to receive in return a receipt or a neat styrene card with one's name on it, certifying, so to speak, one's right to exist. And then a little later on, he says, I own a first-class television set, an all but silent air conditioner, and a very long-lasting deodorant. My armpits never stink. It's like he's lost nature. He's lost his own nature, and he's moved into his styrene card is his right to exist. But he knows he knows that there's some, I'm making quotes, that there's something wrong with him. There's the 98% who believe in God, and the 2% who are atheists, and that leaves not a single percent for anything else. Like the country, the United States, has given up the search. They think they've found.
Yeah, I like this quote here where he says, truthfully, it is the fear of exposing my own ignorance which constrains me from mentioning the object of my search. For, to begin with, I cannot even understand this, the simplest and most basic of all questions. Am I, in my search, 100 miles ahead of my fellow Americans or 100 miles behind them? That is to say, have 98% of Americans already found what I seek, or are they so sunk in everydayness that not even the possibility of a search has occurred to them? I think a big thing in this is in this novel is, should I even ask this question? I mean, that's even an existential question, an existential phenomenon anyway. Should I even ask this question? Whatever the question is.
Yeah, I could tie this in with Kate as well because they have a conversation and they talk about the search. And at one point, Kate confides that, we're in the same boat. Don't try and kid me. Let's just be honest with each other. And that gets them, that's how they're intimate later on in the train. But this is earlier, and this is where she asks about the search. And she says, part of the search? And he says, oh, thanks. I do not answer. She can only believe I am serious in her own fashion of being serious, as an antic sort of seriousness, which is not seriousness at all, but despair masquerading as seriousness. I would as soon not speak to her of such things, since she is bound to understand it as a cultivated eccentricity, like the eccentricity of the roommate she used to talk about. A curious girl, Bobo. Do you know what she liked to do? Collect iron deer. She located every iron deer in Westchester County, and once a month she'd religiously make her rounds and pay them a visit. Just park and look at them. She had names for each of them. Tertullian, Archibald, McLeish, Alf Landon. She was quite serious about it. I have no use at all for girls like Bobo, nor for such antic doings as collecting iron deer in Westchester County. Why don't you sit down? I ask her irritably. Now the vertical search is when, and Kate was talking, and then he interrupts himself with this thought. Am I irritable because now that she mentions it, I do for a fact sound like Bobo and her goddamn iron deer? And
that's a good one.
I love that because that even the practicality of the search for Bobo in the iron deer is what I believe is he wants to condemn it as something everyday or stupid, but it's actually quite the same as going to the movies.
Yeah, I took that as one of those signs, that everyone's illusion or pipe dream or everyone's own particular search is something that is personal to them and perhaps silly to someone else. But there's so many mirrors in this novel because you have that phenomenon on one hand, but then you also have this phenomenon where he's constantly running into people and hearing the specific tales about their lives and having this kind of grass is greener response where being situated into some kind of specific context or some specific narrative that they could tell him in a story as they meet on the street is really attractive to him, and he wants to hear about it. He wants to get lost in it. But then, at the same time, like when he hears about somebody else's search or something like that, it's alien, and it reflects back to him this kind of self-consciousness where he has to see his own search from their perspective, and it seems ridiculous, and it makes him doubt himself. And I think that's another instance, like the story that quote you just brought up about him and Kate mirroring each other and how they both are kind of in that same boat, and he doesn't really want to see. He's so astute and so penetrating in his analysis of everyone else and of himself too, but he doesn't want to find that common ground. He can't totally equate himself with someone else.
He's also got that pressure from his aunt who would have him believe that the search is the most noble thing by playing, by reading the great books, by playing the great music, and in the end when she's given him such a hard time, isn't this what your life is about? Well, no, as a matter of fact, you can go. I just felt like she can skim the surface all she wants, and think that she's doing something that's noble, of her class, but she's not getting in there the way that he's getting in there, and she's not suffering for any of it. She's, it's platitudes. I thought with her.
Isn't there like I feel it's a running joke that everyone wants him to be a researcher, including his aunt.
Yeah.
And then at the end, I can't find this page, but at the end of this long conversation with his mother, which seemed really deep, where she explains to him how he's very much like and unlike his father, and being a deep thinker, and I forget the exact conversation, but at the end of it, it's like, oh, I think you'd be a really good researcher. And then like the chapter ends, like, God damn it, not again.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting the contrast between the search and research, right? It took me a while to kind of like dig into what the differences there were. I feel like I figured out some, but there's still a ways to go.
Well, wasn't he a doctor?
Percy in his
Yeah.
real life?
Yeah.
I mean, that when I saw that, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Regarding some of the writing I saw, I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. Some of the language he was using. But yeah, I mean, is that dichotomy, that fight between research and searching, between science and non-science, or science and poetry?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Science
think
and
you could kind of
spirit.
generalize it like that.
Yeah.
Well, he
Specific
had the
person.
guy, he was kind of jealous of the guy that he did the research with, who could, he had that summer where he was doing some sort of research or other, and there was the guy that he was doing it with, and that guy just plugged away at the workbench, he was a real workbench scientist, just plugged away at it every day. But when he was, he thought that the research was going to actually bring him to something, maybe something in his roots. And he ended up sitting outside on the stairs smoking cigarettes all day because it was empty for him. It didn't it didn't hold the answer to his angst.
Yeah.
I think it comes
And-
back to that line.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just mentioning it. Someone mentioned the line that after he discovered the universe or figured out the universe, he was still left over. So it's the same thing with science. No matter what you discover, you're not going to discover yourself in the way he wants to through this search.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I decided finally that this was basically Hegel versus Kierkegaard, because the more I read about him, the more, I mean, he mentions Kierkegaard over and over in every
Yeah, he does.
interview I read with him. And there's the whole legend, as it goes about Kierkegaard in one of Hegel's lectures, and he's up there giving us dialectical philosophy, tying all of history together in this one long trajectory, and afterwards Kierkegaard supposedly stands up and says something to the effect of, "That's all well and good, Professor, but what am I to do with my afternoon?" So, which I love that story. I think it's great. But so it seems to me like the vertical search is the Hegelian kind of search. It's the progress of history, this all-encompassing historical kind of narrative where everything is leading one direction, and the individual kind of gets lost in that. And what he's onto with the horizontal search is this Kierkegaardian search for the who am I and what is my particular individual place in all of this, and what do I do with my free time, And it goes hand in hand, I think, with what Laura was saying about, science and research and, understanding the world and the universe and what that is. And then, the difference between that and the search is the personal. And it's also, that who am I is the quarry of the horizontal search, I think.
Well, I mean, I think that also following on that is that in science, with the research, that part of it, you think you can, if the idea is to figure it all out, is to come up with the solution. And I think and there is this continuing sort of struggle between science and poetry, for lack of better words. And the fact is that I think what Percy is finding out in this novel, given that he's a doctor, which, as I say, when I found that out, I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Because he's finding out that the importance or the value or what you discover through quote-unquote poetry, that search, who am I, the Kierkegaard search, is that you really can't know. You're left with not knowing.
Yeah.
Whereas science, the goal is to know, is to get the answer to that question. Whereas in poetry, there is no answer.
I've always thought it was interesting that when something's wrong, you come upon someone on the street and they're crying and you say, "What's the matter?" The difference between matter and whatever you want to call it, soul or spirit, as if in him being a doctor, as if there's going to be a material cause for every problem, and as if you can actually figure out life through matter or substance or whatever. You can, knock it down to the atoms and then, oh, right, now I know how to live, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I think you see that struggle, that argument in this book, in this novel. that he's having. It's interesting. That's why I keep saying it's interesting to me when I heard he was a doctor. I was like, oh, that makes sense about this struggle that he's going through in this novel, you know.
Well, also, please.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add that his father is a crucial figure, and he was a doctor in the story. So I think that there's a little bit of a dialogue happening between, you know, the author and himself, and historically, etc. But the doctor is a feature of this book.
Yeah, his father didn't fit in with the kind of easy way that his brothers had. Like him looking at that photograph on the mantle, and you know, his father is you know, one of these things is not like the other. He's obviously, you know, got some sort of discomfort, not comfortable in his skin, the same way that Binks isn't comfortable in his skin.
Yeah, it seems like his father is like a clue for him, or he takes him to be a clue that, you know, he had the same sort of insomnia. He also couldn't sleep like Binks. You know, he would run out to the garden and sleep in the garden. And then he settled for this, you know, from the kind of sophisticated standards of his father's side of the family, a rather kind of ordinary person, and his mother, and you know, she wasn't ever really approved of by his aunt. And so it seems like he's trying to figure out whether his father had figured out anything, and whether, you know, there was some kind of clue there to who he should be, because it seems like that personal history is what he's searching for, and what he seems to find everywhere he goes is that rather than hitting on something authentic would be the overused word, but maybe honest or not self-conscious, he seems to find everywhere that he's forced to perform who he is, instead of, you know, just have it become automatic. He moves to these different neighborhoods, and he tries to sink into the ordinariness of life. He tries to find that authentic self, but he's forced to buy these products or go to these places and try to fit in, but it's always deliberate. It's never something that just catches hold of him and he says, yes, this is who I am.
Yeah, he lives on Elysian Fields, you know, the place of dead heroes ruled by Father Time, so, which is also interesting. I wonder if you know, the first time, he says the first time that he came to the search was when he woke up from having been shot in the field and in the war. And,
yeah, what's up with that? I don't feel like I understand the relationship with death, both with him and Kate and the search. And
oh God, her suicide speech is one of my favorite things in the book. If I didn't have suicide, you know, that I could look to, then I probably would kill myself. If there weren't the option.
Nietzsche says that in one of his books, like almost verbatim, I think.
Fascinating. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
But they both had those near-death experiences which kind of charged them, you know, or set them on a different kind of path. And that's something they share.
What set them on the path of questioning?
It's kind of like the deal you make, right? Like if I make it out of this alive, I'll devote myself to a meaningful existence. You know?
Well, it seemed like it set them like kind of jilted on the wall or something, or tilted on the wall or something like that. Like it jarred them out of like the smooth kind of place that they had, and now they're kind of off center in their lives.
I think that each of them, and I think I'd even include the half brother, had a weird relationship with the tragic circumstances that they were thrown into, and they kind of didn't react to them as would be expected by, I don't know, the world. Because I know the half brother mentions that he was envious of Duval, the one who died, and wanted him to fail. And then Kate said that the accident where her husband died was one of the most, I forget how she puts it, but meaningful and not tragic. Didn't she say she like went on a bus and went to sleep and had the sound asleep of her life that day? So they didn't react to these tragic circumstances, these death-like circumstances, as we expect.
Yes, I mean, so there's, I mean, Jack states it outright. He says, the first time the idea of a search occurred to me, I was lying bloody in a ditch.
Yeah, I love that line.
And the same thing happened with Kate. Everything stopped for her. She must have gotten thrown in. They were just driving down the road, her and her fiance, and then boom, everything changed. And she was aware for the first time. The same thing with his father, the doctor who we've talked about. I mean, just a depressive, hardly eats. And then what is it but the war that pulls him out of his life? And he decides that he can engage with something larger than himself. And this is, I think, Jack, the narrator's presumption is perhaps too maybe found a way to die with meaning. And, he's constantly reflecting about his father dying over there on the wine dark sea, anonymous. And he himself has had that experience, lying, under the bush and not knowing where he is and being completely. What you'd have to imagine is, I think of, oh goodness, I can't bring that up. We haven't talked about it as a group. Anyway, read the Wind Up Bird Chronicle. But this person is completely separated from everything that he's ever known and left to himself and has the realization for the first time.
Wait, stop. You said read the Wind Up Bird Chronicle?
Yes.
Why did you say that? Because I'm actually in the middle of it right now. Huh?
Well, I mean, I don't want to give a spoiler away, but there's a character who at war is separated from his troops and completely isolated.
Oh, yes, yes, I know that scene.
And so he's down in the well.
Yes.
And he's looking up. You know what I'm saying now? Okay, great, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, I know it's a little bit off point here, but I just think that there's a similarity that and the thing is he sees the preciousness of life at its most brilliant. This is a metaphor from the Wind Up Bird that I think will tie in here. But each day at the bottom of this well that he's been thrown into, he sees the sun for just a moment before it disappears. But whenever it does, it lights up the entirety of the well. It's the most white light that you could ever imagine, and it shows him existence almost incarnate every day. And then it goes away instantly, and he's sunk in darkness until it returns around for that moment.
So that's a metaphor for Walker Percy.
So I think that for Walker Percy, it's being completely outside of the system. Whenever he woke up, he doesn't even remember what he was supposed to do. It's like whenever you wake up and you don't know where you are, not because you're drunk or something, no, that happens too, but you wake up and maybe you've been on vacation and you're in a new hotel room and all of a sudden you're completely removed from reference. And that there's a possibility there that I think that he had this leftover charge of purpose and meaning, and he finally was able to see that if he could live his life, it matters. That the fact that you have this life matters because it could go away. I think that's maybe what Kate sees. Maybe this is a life and death moment cliche, but they're able to appreciate life all at once, but then you go back to it and no one else is appreciating it. Everybody's walking dead. Everybody's just talking to each other.
I'm thinking of this quote that I'm looking at right now, which is, I can't remember exactly where it is, but he said, "For some time now, the impression has been growing upon me that everyone is dead. It happens when I speak to people. In the middle of a sentence, it will come over me. Yes, beyond a doubt, this is death. There is little to do but groan and make an excuse and slip away as quickly as one can. At such times, it seems that the conversation is spoken by automatons who have no choice in what they say. I hear myself or someone else saying things like, 'In my opinion, the Russian people are great people, but,' or, 'Yes, what do you say about the hypocrisy of the North? It's unquestionably true. However,' and then I think to myself, 'This is death.'"
Yeah, there's a conversation with Nell and Jack.
Right.
He says, "How is Kate?" "I jump and think hard trying to escape death. To tell you the truth, I don't know." And he says, "I'm so devoted to her. What a grand person." "I am too. She is. Come see us, Binks. I will. We part laughing and dead."
Right.
He really doesn't like small talk, eh?
Yeah. There's the part where basically the search is what anyone would undertake if he were not sunk in the everydayness of his own life. And that, basically quiet desperation is what kills or ignites philosophy, right? It's the thing. You can go, it can lull you into the, everydayness. Everydayness can just beget everydayness, or you can get to a point where it just starts to kill you, and you move toward the search.
There's, I have this one. Oh, yeah, please, no, Cesare, I've got a note here, but I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Oh, I was just on the note of talking about death and everydayness and like sort of the internal versus external, Kierkegaard versus Hegel. You mentioned his father, I think, found meeting when World War II started, and he immediately gained a bunch of weight. And I think you mentioned, or we mentioned, that he devoted to himself to a higher purpose. And on that note, I was confused about a line that the narrator said, and this is on page 158 of the book, and this is in his conversation with his mother, and he's relating to her the story of him guarding a ranger station and falling asleep. I'll just read the quote. It says, "It was not my conscience that bothered me. What I'm trying to tell you is that nothing seemed worth doing except something I couldn't even remember. If somebody had come up to me and said, 'If you will forget your preoccupation for 40 minutes and get to work, I can assure you that you will find the cure for cancer and compose the greatest of all symphonies,' I wouldn't have been interested. Do you know why? Because it wasn't good enough for me." And she says, "That's selfish." He responds, "I know." So I can't quite seem to make sense of that with the higher purpose of life and him sort of rejecting that. Is that just a part of him not caring about any vertical thing except for his soul that he's looking after?
Well, I wondered about that until you just asked, and I think that the reading may go something like this: that he had something that he couldn't remember, and that's what he was preoccupied with, and he wouldn't drop the preoccupation even if you told him about these other things, because those other things weren't good enough. There was something more important than cancer and symphonies. He was on to something greater than that. That perhaps is maybe the reading.
Oh, and that starts the whole search and all that follows, right?
Yes. It's not just good enough for you to go and be a researcher that's brilliant. That's not good enough. I could do that, yeah, but that's not good enough. I don't know what it is, but it's something big. It's everything.
Yeah, I think
hard.
Well, I was just thinking, like, it's not that that isn't important or valid in some kind of way, but it's kind of like the two need each other, or in conjunction with, or isolated of an individual sense of purpose. There's no substratum, for the grand, narrative of things. There's no personal motivation or personal reason to be involved in that. Since you are forced to be an individual, having a consciousness of that grand narrative is only going to make you feel alienated, because we can't divorce ourselves from our own consciousness. We're still stuck with our afternoon, right?
Well, and I think that goes into something that's true of the vertical search. He also talks about the horizontal search, and I think that's where he enjoys making connections at all the movie theaters that he goes to and having conversations with the ticket holder, the ticket taker, and he's trying to ground himself in the actual reality of the real world. Otherwise, where would he be, and would he exist, or would the other person exist? So there's this duality that he goes back and forth between something that is eternal and beyond ideas, or it is the idea, and then the other, which is actually the here and now, and making these connections, and the spirit of the city, and trying to find a way to exist within it. Because whenever he goes to Chicago, misery, that son of a bitch of all miseries, Chicago, it's this place that's a chaos around him, and yet he knows one person, and he needs to make that connection in order for there to be a story about this, or any kind of sense making in this world, a string in the maze, so to speak.
That scene where he goes to visit the man who saved his life is so heart-wrenching. And I found it interesting too that Kate doesn't seem to see just how crazy this guy is. I mean, he's ignoring it, in a way, but telling us about it. He's glossing it over in the, during the encounter, but that guy is out of his mind. He can't look in his eye. He wants to wrestle him. He's completely unaware of his, he won't make his wife comfortable in any way. You know, she just stands holding the heavy baby between rooms. It's just, I mean, and he's the godfather in absentia of their child. So odd. You know, such an intense scene.
Well,
I was just going to say, I read in the part of that interview I posted where Walker Percy was saying that he really feels art is just as cognitive as science, and it's just another way of knowing the world, and it should be considered valid in that way just as much as science is. And I really felt like there were a bunch of scenes like that in this novel where I felt like I couldn't tell you exactly what he's hitting on, but I really understood like the mode of being of some of these characters. Like, I felt like that crazy guy, like, he was crazy, but like I did understand, I think maybe, and I don't know if I can tell you exactly how, but I understood why he had been, he was acting that way towards Binks, you know, why he had to, you know, he had this kind of obsession with him that was never going to be, he was never going to be able to quite make sense of it. You know, he could try to wrestle him, he could try to chummy up to him, you know, he could, you know, that experience that they'd shared, he was going to spend the rest of his life trying to figure that out. And Binks was a kind of clue for him, but you know, it was so big, you know, it was too big for him to grapple with.
Yeah, he saved Binks's life, right? I don't know if we said that.
Yeah.
And it felt to me that he was trying to come to terms with the one moment or the last time that he had actually lived in a vital way. And now he has, you know, he's making good money, he's got a wife and 3 kids, and the description of the wife is brilliant. But in fact, this, you know, what he left behind on the battlefield was vitality, was, you know, his little moment of, you know, coming face to face with that bright light in the well, and he wasn't going to get it again. You know, he had resigned himself, and maybe he, you know, didn't have the constitution for it or whatever, but he had resigned himself to this life where he just wanted to put his hands on Binks, you know, wrestle him to the ground, and, you know, and feel that again, I think. Because there's a real physicality throughout the whole novel. There's, you know, like palpable discomfort. Oh my God, with Mercer. Mercer's amazing. That character is, I was astounded. Every time I read about Mercer, I was astounded.
So what did you guys make of him and of race in general? I think those are actually 2 separate questions, but race was one of the biggest confusions, I think, for me in this novel. Mercer, I felt like, was a kind of double for Jack, because he also was a performer. You know, he's got 1 foot toward the fire and 1 foot out, and he's stuck in a kind of limbo where he's playing this role. He's playing the role of the butler, you know, but it's not who he is, and it's not who he wants to be, but yet it's who he is every day.
But the aunt dragged him into this world too. Yeah. I think that there's a really good clue about the aunt there. But what was the book on his bed?
Of the Rosicrucians.
Right. But how to unlock your secret magic potential or something.
Yeah.
So he's got his own search.
Yeah, he's also desperate to find, you know, some kind of real identity that he can grasp onto, something, you know, that'll just vitalize his life.
Yeah, and the magic in the universe.
Yeah, but race was weird in this novel. The comments on it to me were sufficiently abstract that I really wasn't sure what to make. I mean, I gathered from latter interviews that he was, you know, he's interested in race in the South and is, you know, a defender of equality and you know, things like that, but in the context of the novel, it was sometimes difficult for me to tell just what was going on.
Yeah, whether in fact he was a defender of equality.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's really interesting. I mean, he talks about everybody with this astuteness. So, I mean, he talks about Jews, he talks about white people, he talks about Southern ladies, he talks about, you know, quote, Negroes. There's, you know, so I feel like there is an equanimity to his observations that, though he comes up with archetypes and stereotypes or his categorizations, they're not definite, and they're everybody's a subject to it. You know, it's kind of like, I guess I give him a pass because he's like a comedian. He takes on everybody, or everybody's available to the scrutiny and figuring things out. And what he's saying isn't necessarily bad of people, whether it's talking about how Sharon has like her way of being passive aggressive and being positive to say, don't touch me while we're on this car ride. You know, like, oh, what a nice car. Like, that's her way. And like, he's noticed this about these women. So I think that race and class and, I mean, whole identities are thrown in here. It's not so separate.
Well, wait, hold on. Let me just say, quote this. Hold on a second. It says here, Jews are my first clue. When a man is in despair and does not in his heart of hearts allow that a search is possible, and when such a man passes a Jew in the street, he notices nothing. When a man becomes a scientist or an artist, he is open to a different kind of despair. When such a man passes a Jew in the street, he may notice something, but it is not a remarkable encounter. To him, the Jew can only appear as a scientist or an artist like himself, or as a specimen to be studied. But when a man awakes to the possibility of a search, and when such a man passes a Jew in the street for the first time, he is like Robinson Crusoe seeing the footprint on the beach. So why say Jew?
It seems to me that this is in dealing with Jews in the abstract. I mean, yeah, it's kind of weird. Like, if I were to say something about Jews in the abstract, I can be counted on to say something ignorant before too long. But I mean, when you're dealing with people concretely, you know, it's much more sensible, I think. But yeah, I see that. I mean, so I guess what I'm saying is, yeah, I was confused as well by that, or it didn't ring quite true to me. I don't know. I mean, I see what he's getting at, I think, but I don't know that.
Well, like he says here, because whenever I approach a Jew, the Geiger counter in my head starts rattling away like a machine gun, and as I go past with the utmost circumspection and with every sense alert, the Geiger counter subsides. There is nothing new in my Jewish vibrations. During the years when I had friends, my Aunt Edna, who is a theosophist, noticed that all my friends were Jews. She knew why, moreover. I had been a Jew in a previous incarnation. Perhaps that is it. Anyhow, it is true that I am Jewish by instinct. We share the same exile. The fact is, however, I am more Jewish than the Jews I know. They are more at home than I am. I accept my exile. I mean,
yeah, I think you have to think of the time when it was written.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to think of the time. I agree, but still, I can see how it can be off-putting.
I wasn't put off by it at all.
I just don't. I guess because I just don't see the point of like saying Jew and Negro or Negress or, you know, but again, you're right. You have to think of the time. I understand that.
Yeah, I think that those were not pejoratives. I think that that was the political correct at the time. I may be mistaken about that, but I think that it was equivalent to, I don't know, the public address of people. You know, he does talk about other people who have nasty things to say, but that's not his spirit either. So I think that it is a time language thing. Yeah, I mean, it is prickly. You know what his observations may be, or what this calls into question. You know, because again, I think that everybody gets it square on. I mean, he talks about Southerners. He talks about women, and I don't think that what he has to say is. I think that what he's adding is complex and not wrong. I mean, okay. So for example, I remember this one, and it struck me as interesting, but it was racial. So he was talking about, I've noticed that Negroes in general, and again, I think that Negroes is a way of saying black or African American in the time, that they have a tendency to be afraid of motors. And that stood out at me, that was interesting, but also possible, that maybe motors was somehow like a modern white man's game, or that maybe it had just been the dawn of motors, like airplanes in World War II, and like the motors that were now coming into people's houses behind refrigerators and stuff. And it was a sign of a changing world, and that world being laid over top of an older agrarian Southern style world as well. I don't know. That was that stood out at me.
I used to say
Daniel,
that.
you brought up. Oh, sorry, Cesare.
Oh, I was just gonna say that, like, if you take that thought process is that black people had been subjected to the edge of industrial revolution. So as soon as there's a new edge of industrial revolution, motors and cars, then they're gonna have to be subservient to that again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was more of a lens to see through to a time rather than this is like it wasn't an ignorant comment. It was more of in the way of which things go. This is something that's current. This is something that's happening. And I think the way that he identified people's way of talking as well. I mean, everybody in the street that he met, he had some kind of. Occasionally, there would be a breakthrough good moment with somebody, but usually he was like, "You guys are all dead, and you're just talking about like the latest whatever." It's yeah. So I mean, whenever he wants to level somebody, I mean, he says a lot more damning things, I suppose. So.
Yeah. Well, the African American guy who pulled up behind them and went in to get ashes for Ash Wednesday, and when he came out, he said that when he went in, he was trying to show them that this was normal for him. He'd been in the neighborhood before, like, don't be suspicious of me. And then when he came out, because of the color of his skin, you couldn't even see the ash on his forehead. And he wondered, like, why are you even here? And it wasn't, why are you here, like, what are you doing in my neighborhood? It was, why are you actually subjecting yourself to being in the everydayness? Why are you trying so hard to be in the everydayness? Like the rest of these people, like, can't you see they're just, that they're dead? Can't you see that that's what you're going for, too, if you actually subject yourself to this?
But you could ask, of course, the same question, right, about why he's proud of the fact that his armpits don't stink, or that he has a really nice, air conditioner or something like that, right?
Yeah, I think
that's what's interesting about Jack is like he points the finger, but ostensibly, he's doing the same thing in his way.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's his struggle.
Yeah.
That's the struggle within this book is that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's pulled into this everydayness because that's all there is around him, but he knows that is not where he should be, or any of us should be where he should be.
Well, I wasn't sure about that, so I guess that was a difficulty for me, because you have in some circumstances him trying, or maybe that is the nature of the struggle. He's trying to fold into the everydayness, but then he's struggling against it as well. He goes to these places, he tries to live in the quarter for a while, or he tries to do this or that, and really, be one amongst, but then also, he feels he's separate, or he looks for something deeper. He can never really, settle down anywhere.
I just want to point out, this book starts out with him, or he's back from the war, and back to this thing about the well and the sunlight. I mean, I think a lot of veterans go through this. I think we've gone through that kind of experience, and then you come back and you got to be like, okay, I got to be normal. I got to go to school. I got to pick up my eggs. I mean, there's an everydayness quality, which I think this is why this is coming out through him in this book, and that he knows, he can see everything that around him is just futile. It's just empty. Yes.
Well, would it be fair to say he's looking for like an immediacy to life? I mean, he wants to be in the moment, and he's very aware of general malaise and the feeling, and he wants to get in touch with the movie owners. I found it strange with his relationship with his secretaries, because he's clearly a deep thinker, and he has a hard time getting out of his head, and yet he tries to maintain these, I don't know if it's fair to say frivolous relationships, but they clearly, like from the get-go, you see these aren't going to go anywhere. He's not going to find what he's looking for in his dealings with Sharon or the other secretaries.
I think that's just sex.
Well, just sex, but also that there's a release that, I think that he says at one point, they have that one glorious moment where there's a release, where he's actually released from the search. He's in the throes of, in the throes of orgasm, he can actually be free.
Like when you're in the throes of battle and
Yeah.
war,
Yeah.
that immediacy. I'm not going to make a correlation between orgasm and a near-death experience, although many people do. But my point is, I mean, that kind of intensity, immediacy, like you bring up, Cesare, is that it releases you from that. And you're right.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just gonna say I had a hard time with when he's talking about Sharon before the car ride. And he's like, I've never been more in love with her. I've never been, he's thinking about her all the time. And I didn't know if that was him being like tongue in cheek or taking writerly leeway. But I'm like, come on, you're 29 years old. Like you gotta know better than this.
Because I think that there's something to his love affairs with the secretaries and his love of the movies. I mean, they're both these kinds of fantasies, and that's his way of escaping, is into these fantasies, and the love affairs tend to break down as things become real and their conversations, become more personal. They can't project fantasies onto the situation anymore after a while, and then he moves on to another girl. And I think this is part of why movies are so great for him too, is they're these kind of capsulized doses of these fantasies, and they totally, which I think they are for our culture too, now decades later.
I liked how, even though, I mean, we talked about immediacy and he wanted to live in the moment, experience the world, at the same time, I love the scene with Sharon in the car. He was very intensely aware of the general mood of the situation, and the car, if you remember, he had to switch out his car because the car wasn't right. He had to go with the MG instead of the Ford, and the sun had to shine the right way, and then eventually he even had to get into an accident to save the situation. It's one of those things I can't quite explain, but I understand where he's coming from, where he's hitting this, being intensely aware of the feel of the situation, even if you couldn't quite dictate why.
You mean the sensory aspects of the situation? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, but it's not quite just like if the sun's not right. It's a situation feels wrong, and if something changes, just like a car, or maybe the sun shines a different way, your mood and your feeling changes completely with it.
Yeah, it's what makes him feel exalted. It's what, he could go to the movies and get that exalted feeling. Linda couldn't, she hated it, but she would be in love with him when they went out dancing, and it was that moment, that place, that context that made her feel exalted and banished the malaise for her. And, there she could be somebody that was in love, and he would do the same thing, those car rides, he would love them. He would always think about, looking at these girls, couldn't we be speeding off along the Gulf Coast or spinning down the Gulf Coast, I think he says. But then when he's on the bus earlier in the novel, he says, well, I really hate cars. I don't like cars at all. I like riding the bus. I like going through these neighborhoods on the bus. And it's whatever the moment is, it's always contending with that everydayness or the malaise. And, it may not be a constant thing, but he's always aware of it, like you say.
Now we're talking about everybody in the world.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we're talking about everyone's experience. I think what is important is looking at, I mean, I'm not disregarding everybody's statements, they're all really wonderful. I'm just saying that we have to look at what he's saying specifically, because the things you were just saying, Daniel, and sorry too, to me, they actually speak of everyone's experience, that we're all seeking to escape the malaise, at least those of us who are not dead, like Percy refers to. Those of us who are not dead and are actually reflecting and thinking, right?
You think there's something exceptional about Jack?
Well, I mean, putting aside the fact that this book is just beautifully written, but I mean, on one level there's nothing exceptional about him, and on another level there is something exceptional about him. But in many ways he's bringing up in very beautiful language and very, very unique thoughts everybody's experience, just like Kierkegaard did when he stood up out of the audience and said, "Yeah, what am I supposed to do with my afternoon now?"
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I did think it was interesting, going back to the girls, that when it was that when he had sex and was with someone whom he actually loved, it just all went to shit. That whole, like, I'm not sure what page it is, like, flesh, poor flesh, now at this moment summoned all at once to be all and everything, end all and be all, the last and only hope, quails and fails. The truth is, I was frightened half to death by her bold, not really bold, not whorish bold, but theorish bold, carrying on. I reckon I am used to my blushing little Lindas from Gentilly.
Wow.
So the reality of it, there's no fantasy in what's happening. I think that he's kind of already on the way, knows that he's going to be marrying her, and that this is what, and that there's something expected of him. I think that there are no expectations of him, or in his fantasy, these secretaries have no expectations. And then when there are the long pauses in the telephone calls, it's the end. Once there actually has to be true consideration, true communication, then you're done. So.
Oh, God.
I'm out of here.
Yeah, but he can't hide from Kate. He can't hide from Kate like he can't hide from himself.
There's so much more in common between the two of them than he'll ever admit. Because her response to the despair is to kind of retreat into this childhood thing where she wants people to tell her what to do and to kind of treat her as a small child, and she'll, divest herself of any responsibility for her own life or her actions and just want to be directed, and taken care of. But that's really kind of what Jack ends up doing as well. I mean, he allows to be led along by his aunt. He allows to be to marry Kate. He allows them to tell him what he should do, where he should go, and he doesn't really ever put up much of a fight. And ostensibly he tells himself his head's kind of in the clouds. He's searching for other things, but he doesn't. He never exactly grabs the reins of his own life. Except in full flight from something.
Yeah. Man, when his aunt made that speech to him, I was just thinking the whole time, she is the devil. She is just the fucking devil. I hated her in those moments, like viscerally. I just wanted to reach in and grab her by the throat. How dare you?
What's the difference between the two of them? Because I think that's interesting, why one person would be so alienated and another person so embedded within the social fabric, or is she performing as well? Is she inauthentic?
I feel she comes off as more self-assured.
Yeah, ostensibly.
She's comfortable in her, that place that they. I mean, it wasn't until her brothers died that she took up. She became very masculine. I'm sure you noticed all of that. That she became a prince once the true signs of the dynasty were gone. She could become the prince. And so there's that surety, and I think that surety is the thing that he's fighting for and against through the entire story. That surety has its own everydayness.
Do you think that the necessity she feels in having to situate him in his particular place is a part of her own anxiety about existence, maybe, or trying to reinforce her vision of the world?
You're probably right. You're probably kinder to her than I was.
Because it seems like she's really distressed. I mean, she's not just pissed. She's kind of aghast. Why can't he, find his role? It should be so apparent to him. Why can't he take his place in the family, do something respectable, and he should be up on a pedestal, and yet he's down here just loafing around. And it bothers her. He's this vacant kind of person, and she can't seem to penetrate into any real coherent Jack.
Yeah. Well, she obviously never figured out what went wrong with his dad, and maybe there's a lot of anxiety around that.
Yeah.
Now, are you going to go the same way?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I'm with Mary that I really didn't like the aunt as a character, and maybe it's just because of my own psychological baggage, but she seemed to be the type of person that, it's not that she was only self-assured, but it seemed like she could not even admit that she might not know what was going on, or she might not know what was the best course of action. And I mean, I think the narrator's trying to explore that through the novel, and everyone seemed to have exact advice for him, which they were very sure of, which they shouldn't have been of.
I thought that the, like, whatever 3 or 4 times that she very pointedly said to him, just tell me one thing, just one more question. And then, whether he answered it or not, that wasn't her last question. And it wasn't a question at all. It was, how dare you, the whole time. How dare you not have listened to me? How dare you not be the person I want you to be? Which is why I was pissed at her.
Yeah.
I liked him in search mode. Like, I was heartbroken at the end, when he decided that when he basically gave himself over to servitude.
Yeah. So what becomes of them then, I wonder?
Well, I mean, they get along whenever he finally admits that he's just ordinary, and they come to agree that that's the case, and he's not actually a hero like the other men she believed in her family to be. So she feels this tension between, like, wanting to realize his potential. I think that's pretty, that's an affectionate, like, motherly trope, and she's frustrated with him because he's just not getting up and doing something. He's just running around and living his life, like a shame. And she sees it as a great shame for the nation. I feel like she is someone who sees the world as on the decline. I mean, she says, let me tell you something. If he out yonder is your prize exhibit for the progress of the human race in the past 3,000 years, then all I can say is that I am content to be fading out of the picture. Perhaps we are a biological sport, I'm not sure. But one thing I am sure of, we live by our lights, we die by our lights, and whoever the high gods may be will look them in the eye without apology. And this I actually like right here. She says, more than anything, I wanted to pass on to you the one heritage of the men of our family, a certain quality of spirit, a gaiety, a sense of duty, a nobility worn lightly, a sweetness, a gentleness with women, the only good things the South ever had and the only things that really matter in this life. But tell me one more thing. You're not a bad boy, I wish you were. But how did it happen that none of this ever meant anything to you? Clearly it did not. Would you please tell me? I am genuinely curious.
It's great.
Curious my ass.
She has a real idea
wants to lecture him.
Yeah. She has a real idea of, like, the mold she wants to fit him into and the mold that he should be in. And it's not just to do with money, because it seems like he's very well off his stockbroker job. So it has to do with an idea of, I mean, the paragraph you just read of what a man of his class should be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't agree. I have to admit, I like this character. I mean, she is just so bold and in your face. And whenever she really lets go at the end, and she's like, you know what? And I'll admit it. I think that people are better than other people. This is class. I'm not afraid to say it. And then she goes on, her talk about where civilization is, and then I think that she gives herself back up to it, which is like, well, this may be the end of the times, and it's no country for great people, so I'm happy just to go.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, there's a lot of great Southern culture, right? Like, as in the case of this novel. But I think there is this kind of facade of chivalry that, I don't know, is sometimes
she's
kind
not
of like an oil slick on our culture down here for me.
Yeah, I think that what she's talking about is the entire. I mean, the thing that she's highlighting is that, yeah, she has a Southern pride, etc. But I think that what her main line of contention is, what is it right here? Ours is the only civilization in history which has enshrined mediocrity as its national ideal. I mean, it's a national concern, I feel like. She's talking about the way the world is moving. And, she says, there's no orgies, no blood running in the street, no babies thrown off cliffs. No, we're sentimental people and we horrify easily. Our moral fiber is rotten. Our national character stinks to high heaven. Yeah, we're sincere. Didi Lavelle is the most sincere person I know. Every time she crawls in bed with somebody else, she does so with the utmost sincerity.
That's like a paragraph out of Nietzsche.
Yeah.
This is what, how many years ago? It's still true?
Yeah. Yeah, I thought of Nietzsche too, because I mean, this is exactly the criticism of Aristotle, right? And the Greek kind of everything in moderation. You know, he was the king of that. You know, that the democratic kind of ethos where, you know, we're all going to get along and kind of homogenize into this, you know, kind of middle class that, you know, is unremarkable and mediocre, but at the same time lacks the terrible extremes that we're so afraid of.
I was really struck, though, by her almost magical thinking about him. How the hell was he supposed to know anything about what she thought he knew about her stepdaughter? How is he supposed to know that, you know, why wouldn't why wouldn't she have known that they were in Chicago together? You know, he's very careful when he was writing about, you know, after Kate said that she wanted to go with him, she left with her aunt. Like, they all kind of went off together. And then he fell asleep, and then Kate was back with tickets. And so he's swept along in this thing, and no responsibility whatsoever put on Kate. All on him.
Yeah.
And it's this kind of magical thinking that because you're in my family, you will have this noble demeanor, and you will have done the noble thing. And he's just a guy who had to go to Chicago, and and Kate wanted to tag along. How much responsibility do you have to take for that? But she'll put it all on him. She puts the responsibility for the family and the entire nation, you know, the South at least, on his shoulders. And he takes it, you know. He's dumbfounded, but he takes it. Yeah, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have lived. You know, I was the one who brought the company into a bad place in the war. Like, it was his mistake that got people killed, and that almost got him killed.
Well, you never really find out if it's true, but Kate also claims that when she talks to her, she speaks exactly the same way about him. So I wondered if this was attacked, you know, a sort of strategy on the end, because she's very wily. And is it the case that this is meant to be provocative? Is she trying to get a rise out of him so that, you know, is she as sincere as she claims to be? Because she seems like almost the master strategist. We know her husband is just kind of taken the back seat, and like you said, she's become the dominant presence. And so
they did get married, which I think was I think that was it all along. This, you know, two noble families, get them together.
Yeah.
But his mother also wanted them to get married. I think he mentions in the conversation that his own mother had an idea of Kate devoid of reality, and she viewed her as an emblem for what she wanted Kate to be.
And I think that I just wanted to bring up what Kate comes to before their marriage. You know, on that train, I think this is very interesting, and she's aware that this isn't very what we would say feminist now, but she doesn't give a shit. Like, this is her thing. Like, I'll gladly tell you because I just found out and I never want to forget. What I want is to believe in someone completely and then do what he wants me to do. If God were to tell me, Kate, here's what I want you to do. You get off this train right now and go over there to that corner by the Southern Life and Accident Insurance Company and stand there for the rest of your life and speak kindly to people. You think I would not do it? You think I would not be the happiest girl in Jackson, Mississippi? I would. And then later on she says, she basically says, yeah, I know that this isn't the best way, but it is a way, and this is what I want to do. Or people might have other ideas about this, but this is something I've hit on that could work. And then at the end, you know, she's alone again, you know, and feels vastly alone. And this was so interesting. She was sent off to go get something while Jack stayed at the hospital with Lonnie as he was dying, and she had a panic attack that she was going to be going out into the wide world without him. And she's looking at a flower, and then Jack intuits that the flower's important, picks it up, gives it to her. She smiles, and she says, "Okay, I'm going to go. This is really important, though. I'm going to be sitting on the east side of the bus heading there, and I'm going to wear this carnation, and I want you to be thinking of me like that. Can you think of me as I'm going? Like, you'll keep me in mind, right?" And that was just heart-wrenching to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that first thing when she talked about God, I wrote down, this is the saddest thing I've ever read.
Well, yeah, and that's her other thought, too, right? It's not that suicide is a problem, it's the exact opposite. This is going back to what we said earlier. If I thought I could not kill myself, then I would have to. It would be the worst. But since I can, I've got that on the back burner. It's the same thing out of the Sunset Limited that White says to Black, that no, don't think of death as something that I fear. I'm happy for death. I thank God for death, or what? Ironically, I need that. If I didn't think that would exist, then oh my God, it would be the worst.
Yeah.
If I thought there was no chance there could be nothingness, I need nothingness. I count on nothingness.
Yeah. Whenever everything else fails, all I have to do is consider suicide, and in 2 seconds I'm as cheerful as a nitwit. But if I could not kill myself, then I would. I can do without Nembutal or murder mysteries, but not without suicide.
Great. Wait, I wanted to say something because I gotta go. So I have two things I want to ask. One, I wasn't able to finish the novel because obviously I had this problem with my dog this week, so I didn't have the time. But I have a question for everybody who has, obviously, is how did you feel about the ending? I mean, as an ending to this search and this struggle in this novel.
I think I already said I was heartbroken. I wondered a lot if I shouldn't be heartbroken, if I should be happy for him. I mean, at least his everydayness now had purpose, but I was really sad for the loss of the search. And I was really heartbroken when Lonnie died.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I'm with you, Laura. I didn't finish it. I was just going to pretend I did, though. So. I'll get to it, though. I'll get to it for sure.
What about you?
I like the ending was kind of a non-ending in a way, maybe necessarily so, but I do think that I don't think good things are in store for them. I mean, just thinking about it in realistic terms and trying to take these characters as real people, if their lives were to play out, I think disasters are around the corner eventually for us all. I mean, every human life is apocalyptic. But for Kate, I don't think what she thinks is going to sustain her is going to be able to do it. And I think probably suicide is, in actuality, the result of her story, for me.
Well, there was just one thing that was said before the final bit about Lonnie in the hospital, and this really stood out at me. He's going through everything that he's kind of like learned, or just talks about the search, and I don't really have much more to say. For one thing, I don't have the authority, as the great Danish philosopher declared, to speak of such matters in any other way than the edifying. Reticence, therefore, hardly having a place in a document of this kind, it seems as good a time as any to make an end. And then he goes on to talk about Lonnie and the piece of jasmine behind her hair, and the final words are this, as she's walking away with the flower and going off to get on the bus. I watch her walk towards St. Charles, Cape jasmine held out against her cheek, until my brothers and sisters call out behind me.
So yeah, it's responsibility in both directions. It's service in both directions. That's it. That's his life now. There is one thing I wanted to mention that I thought was amazing when I read it, and it has apropos of nothing. He's talking about Mardi Gras. The other day, a group of Syrians from Algiers formed a crew named ISIS.
Yeah, I highlighted that.
What?
I highlighted that.
Okay.
That's funny.
Yeah, it threw me for a loop.
He can see. He had this foresight.
That's right. He saw the future.
Anyway, I gotta go. But one thing I wanted to say, and I'm echoing now. I don't know why. The end of the book. I'm just wondering if his search would indicate he gave up or threw off. The thing about the search is that he was not able to obtain whatever trying to obtain because it's unobtainable. And I think the lesson, if there is a lesson, is that that's okay.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, you know, and that's too. It brings up that thing in that article that you posted, Daniel, where he said something about novelizing. Was it novelizing philosophy?
Yeah.
I just thought that was brilliant. But I think that's what philosophers are doing. Is we're questioning, and we don't necessarily find the answer, and that's okay. In fact, I find great comfort in not finding the answer.
Yeah.
I think that we do well to allow some mysteries to be mysterious and enjoy the search without having a lot of anxiety about finding an answer.
Right, exactly. I think that that's one way of finding happiness in life.
Yeah, I feel that as well. I think that he's not given it up. It's just not resolved.
And that's okay.
Yeah, I think I remember from that interview one thing Walker Percy said was that it's the place of the novelist to ask the questions, but not necessarily to give the answers.
Right.
So,
Mm-hmm. I love what he said about making a contract with your readers, which I think is just a beautiful thing.
Anyway, I gotta go, but I just want to say my favorite quote from this book, there are many, but one of the tops is when he says, "My unbelief was invincible from the beginning."
Mm.
That is a good one.
That's good.
All right, I gotta go.
All right,
Okay,
thanks, Laura,
take
for
care.
coming.
Have a good night.
Folks, unfortunately, the everydayness of life is calling me back as well, and
Okay.
I should wrap up as well. But
Don't just give it over to service, Nathan. Please. My last request. Okay. It was nice talking to y'all.
Yeah.
Yeah, good talk.
Love the book. Love the talk.
Okay, for the record, Mary wants to marry. Mary wants to marry.
Oh my God.
Okay.
You violated client privilege.
Okay, onward.